Okay. The webinar is now broadcasting. I'm going to mute.
Hi everyone, this is Lori Ward, CEO with Washington's National Park Fund. We're glad you're here with us today. We'll begin in just another few minutes. Thank you. As you're settling in, go down to the chat box if you would. Tell us what your favorite spot at Mount Rainier is. Share some of your thoughts there with us. Indian Bar, Carol, thanks. Summerland, it's beautiful. Couple of carols there, thank you. Jerry, the Grove of the Patriarchs, isn't that incredible? The trees, the river's so clean. Panorama Point, I bet you love to hike up there, don't you, Sally? Summerland, Second Burrows, John, that's great.
Burrows.
Paradise, Jeff, the mountain and the river, it's beautiful. Pinnacle Peak area. We have a poll for all of you. See the poll down at the bottom, click on that for us. We want to know, how tall is Mount Rainier? I know this is debatable. People debate this. Take your guesses here. Interesting, isn't it, watching that? We have 80 people signed on so far. We're anticipating about 200, so we're getting there. And Tracy and I were talking earlier before you all joined us that people debate it's either 14,411, 14,411, or 14,410, depends on the snow each year. So the folks who are guessing nearly 3 miles, you have the best guess, you're right in there. Nice job. One other poll we're gonna do real quick. What year did Mount Rainier National Park open? May take just a sec to pull that up. What year did the park open? As you're driving in, just an interesting fact, as you're driving in under the Nisqually entrance outside of Ashford, and you look on the far right side, you see a small cabin there, and that was the original superintendent's cabin, and he collected and admitted people into the park, so it's kind of fun. What year was it founded? This is interesting. About 50% of you have voted. Anybody else? Tracy, what year did it open?
Mount Rainier National Park was founded in 1899.
That's great. So the folks, 40% of the people guess it. So 1899. Thank you.
We look a lot younger.
We're going to go ahead and begin. I'm Lori Ward, and I have the privilege of being the CEO of Washington's National Park Fund. We get to work very closely with our national parks here in Washington State. And we work with Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. I've had the privilege of working with Tracy since she got here. I remember the first time we met, Tracy, and we were out in the parking lot, and I was excited to see you and meet you, and I'd heard such good things, and I just remember that very distinctively. Tracy, if you haven't seen her speak in public, she's smart, she's witty. She talks fast once in a while, but that's part of it. She's a great superintendent, deputy superintendent under Chip Jenkins up at Mount Rainier. And she's going to share a lot of stories with us today. We have a series of questions that we're going to walk you through, and she'll share perspectives on the park, a lot of different topics we're going to touch down on. So we're grateful that Tracy's here with us today. And we're going to start off by just hearing a little bit about, Tracy, what inspired you to become a park ranger?
Thanks. Well, you know, I've been working for the National Park Service for 20 years. And for me, I've been a lifelong lover of the natural world. I've always been really fascinated by nature, science, history, and I've always loved connecting with people. And I got to visit a lot of parks growing up, state parks, national battlefields, national seashores, birthplaces, homes, a lot of things that, you know, perhaps for others wouldn't be as interesting, but for me, they really just fascinated me. I traveled all across the Eastern Seaboard with family and extended family, and mostly in the Southeast. But yeah, I got to travel west of the Mississippi for the first time when I was in college. And I remember flying across the Rockies for the first time and looking down and thinking, there I will go. I was destined to be in a place with mountains like the one you can see behind me. And I had the chance to choose things in college and grad school that would support that goal, majoring in natural resources. And when I was in grad school, I was at Duke University, their school of the environment, and I had a chance while I was pursuing an advanced degree to do an internship with the National Park Service. And for me, that was something that was really life-changing. And it's true for a lot of people who join the ranks in the National Park Service, that they somehow start as either a youth, high school, college, grad school, or maybe right after when they're trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. And for me, it was an internship during grad school. And I knew as soon as I did that, that there was a way for me to connect the thing that I love with the thing that I'm good at. And so I, for the first time, saw that a career in a national park might be something that was in the works for me.
That's great. I appreciate that. Somebody's wondering what you like most about being in the position.
You know, so the deputy superintendent position, for those that don't know, we're sort of number two second in command at the park. And if you compared it to private industry, it might be like being a chief operating officer with the superintendent being the chief executive officer. But we trade back and forth on a lot of those roles. And we're one of 60 parks in this region, which runs, you know, from Washington, Samoa, and Guam. And we have about 400 units in the National Park Service. So, you know, whether you're at Mount Rainier or you're at Grand Canyon or Blue Ridge Parkway or any of the other parks around the country, there is a lot of similarity to being in park leadership. We have similar divisions that do the things that we do at the park. And it's a joy. You know, most of the people who work for the National Park Service do so because they have this sense of public service. Many of them love the outdoors, love history, like I do, things that drive us to do what we do. And there are a whole range of people who work in the parks, but it's a great profession. And I think if I weren't doing park rangering as a job, I would probably be in the parks all the time on my free time.
Like a lot of us, a lot of people say to us all the time, you know, if I had my life, I would love to be a ranger. If I had it all.
A lot. We do.
Yeah.
If I could be anything, I'd be a park ranger.
Yeah, it's so cool. Tell us about a memorable day at Mount Rainier. What stands out for you and what made it memorable?
Yeah, there are a few that are really memorable to me. You know, one, a few years ago, we had the opportunity to honor service at Mount Rainier. We had 4 individuals who gave their lives saving others: Margaret Anderson, Nick Hall, Sean Ryan, and Phil Otis. And these folks are memorialized in the park. We have a Valor Memorial in the Longmire area that recognizes them. And at the time that we dedicated that, that was probably one of the most impactful and meaningful experiences in my career, specifically at Mount Rainier, obviously. But you know, what it means for the entire National Park Service is this idea of the gift of service and sometimes the ultimate sacrifice. So that's one memory that comes to mind. And another memory that comes to my mind is the memory of a naturalization ceremony. So some people may not know that national parks are often the sites of naturalization ceremonies where folks are getting the chance to become a United States citizen. And in 2016, the National Park Service was celebrating its 100th year. Of course, Mount Rainier was founded in 1899, as you heard, so we predate the existence of the Park Service. But the Park Service was celebrating its 100th anniversary, and we hosted an immigration and naturalization ceremony up at Paradise. And it was one of those beautiful bluebird days. The mountain was out like it is in this picture. The flag was waving. We had park rangers and hundreds of people in the public out there in July, just milling about on the plaza at Paradise. And we had about 20 folks who were taking their citizenship oath. And, you know, when they become a US citizen, one of the things that they're getting ownership of is our public lands, you know, whether they're forests, national parks, national recreation areas, or otherwise. These are some of the essential things that we value as Americans. And this is something that you get place to hold a ceremony like that. And what really moved me was that for the people who were taking that oath, they were seeing firsthand how their participation in the event really moved the people who just happened to be visitors and who just happened to show up. And people who were just planning on a regular visit with their family got to learn this really valuable lesson in civics and about why the national parks are important to the essence of being an American, and why some people would choose to take their very first steps as citizens in a national park.
That's beautiful, Tracy. You know, I remember that day. I remember it well, and I remember you talking about how memorable it was. Can you tell folks if they want to see the memorial, the Valor Memorial, is it open to the public, and how do they get there?
It is. It's an understated memorial, and I think, you know, the idea is that from the memorial, kind of through it, you can see the mountain. I'm going to pull up a little quick picture here. I'm going to share my screen. This is what it looks like. These are basalt columns that were designed to look like the rock formations that are across the Nisqually River. And this is looking from our community building in Longmire across the Nisqually River towards the mountain. And the folks who gave their lives in service to saving others at Mount Rainier, their names are inscribed on these columns. This was designed by a group of really talented Mount Rainier employees and others, and came to fruition, and we dedicated it a few years ago. And it's something that people can come and visit. If they come to the Longmire area, they will travel through the administrative area to the back, and there's an old bridge. It looks really old. It's not as old as it looks. They'll cross that bridge one car at a time, go slowly. And our Longmire community building that we use for some administrative purposes and group events is on the other side. And just behind it is our Stewardship Campground, where we host volunteers each year who participate in a range of projects. And just tucked into the corner of that, where you can see the mountain, is this National Park Service Valor Memorial at Mount Rainier. It's a really important piece of the history of the mountain, but really more importantly, a piece of the history of service of National Park Rangers all across this country, who are unsung heroes with regards to giving their lives to save others. So I invite people to come and, you know, take a few moments and ponder what it means to give that kind of service.
Thanks, Tracy. Tracy, people often ask, they say that the parks are just getting overrun by crowds. We hear people commonly say that we're loving our national parks to death. How do you react to that? How does that sit with you?
Gosh, you know, it is something that we've heard a lot. And it's absolutely true that we have a lot of visitors. The national parks around the country are popular for good reason. They're some of the most iconic landscapes. They're telling some of the most important and critical stories that we have to tell. And they commemorate important events, activities, and people, and places in our history. So really, they're essential to the fabric of the United States. So we would understand that people want to see them. I think when people talk about the national parks being loved to death, they have this sense that any given area has somehow reached its capacity, or that the area is having so much visitation that the visitation is starting to have an impact. And the impacts can be seen in a couple of different ways. The impacts can be on the natural and cultural resources. For example, people might go off trail and damage meadows, or overuse something that's designed to be protected. And on the other hand, it can also really impact the visitors' experience themselves. You know, if people are going out and they're expecting an experience of solitude, but they can't achieve that because of crowding, then it diminishes the park experience, you know. And when we think about what the National Park Service is all about, we were founded, the National Park Service, in 1916 with the Organic Act. And the Organic Act has two really important parts. And they are for us to protect these resources for the future generations and also give people a chance to connect with them. So the connection part is really a part of our mission. So it's important that people connect. So, you know, the idea that people can love it to death, I do think that there is a place for understanding how many people can be contained in any given area, whether it's a parking lot at Paradise or whether it's a wilderness trail. And each particular area is going to have its own threshold beyond which the impacts might be unacceptable. But what we don't want to do is discourage people from coming to their parks. You know, we want people to connect with their public lands, and it can be in person, but it can also be virtually, and can also be really with the park down their street. You know, one of the things that we say about Mount Rainier, and I think this is really important, is that it's an icon of the Pacific Northwest. You know, everywhere houses are sort of oriented towards the mountain, or businesses have Rainier in the title, or streets are named after Rainier. Where it is, it's important to the Pacific Northwest and the nation. So there are a lot of ways to experience Mount Rainier that don't involve driving to Paradise on a busy summer weekend, because we get a lot of visitation. We get over 1 million people just between Memorial Day and Labor Day up at Paradise. And most of them come on Saturdays and Sundays. And many of them want to come to view the wildflowers at their peak. It's an incredibly valuable experience. But if you come just a few days later, midweek, the flowers are no less beautiful, and you might have a better experience in finding parking for yourself. So, you know, I think some of our facilities in the parks were designed to hold fewer people, you know, whether it's restrooms reaching capacity, or buildings built for a smaller number of people, or roads that were built, like in Mount Rainier's case. You know, our main entrance road is a part of the National Historic Landmark District. And the gentle curves as you go up the mountain, they're designed purposely by the early landscape architects. You come around this curve and you get a peak of the mountain on your left. You go around this gentle curve and there's a big reveal of a mountain. And those were designed purposely for slower speeds, fewer numbers of vehicles, and an unfolding of the experience of the mountain. But if you have lots and lots of people going fast and crowding in, then that experience can get diminished. So I think that capacity is a real issue in national parks around the country. And I do think it's possible for there to be too many people in a certain area so that no one has that good experience. And it's something all the parks around the country are struggling with.
Thank you, Tracy. Tracy, is it true that Paradise is one of the most snowiest places on earth? That's my first part of that question. And then second, how do you manage all of that snow? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
There are some incredibly talented people helping us manage that snow. So snow falls in Mount Rainier the entire year, 12 months out of the year. And I think some people are surprised to see how much snow is up there. I'm going to share my screen and show a picture of some of the most important people in doing that. And I'm going to scoot over here so you can see these snow machines that are moving snow up at Paradise right in the parking lot. They're incredibly talented people. They're incredibly dedicated to the work that they do. They get up at the crack of dawn, they show up at the park, but yet they're one part of a huge group of people that make it possible for you to enjoy a visit. There are people out, whether it's from avalanche risk or the condition of the road itself. There are people who are going about their job trying to open up facilities for the season, de-winterizing the facilities. We have this sort of grand dance of employees that happens each year as we reopen the park for the summer when the intensive visitation comes. Although we're operating 12 months a year, we have our roads crews that are going out there getting it cleared, and we have our mechanic folks who are making sure that equipment can get where it needs to go and is being serviced. I think we go through like $66,000 worth of chains every year for some of these. It's an amazing amount of work. And then we have our crews that go in and de-winterize the utilities and make sure that the utilities are open and that power can get everywhere that it needs to. We have solar power in some places, like Sunrise, for example, used to run entirely on a diesel generator, and we still have that as backup. But you know, when you plug into something at Sunrise, there is not public power available in that remote location. So we've created solar arrays there, and we have amazing staff who work troubleshooting that and making sure that the diesel generators are backed up and ready for operation. I'm going to throw up a picture of one of these folks. So here's someone doing some of that great work on one of our generators. He'll probably be mad at me for sharing his picture, but I won't leave it up for long. You know, these are some of the unsung heroes behind what it is that we do. People are making sure that we have power, that we have drinking water, that we have wastewater treatment plants. They are fixing the things that the winter did to our facilities, whether it's carpenters or folks going in to make sure that the roofs are in place. And it really is an incredible amount of work to make it look like it's easy. And, you know, I just think that people need to see the faces of our folks behind the scenes. You know, we've got dispatch folks that are making sure that people can drive on the road safely. And we have people who are out there ensuring that the signage is appropriate and our web information is up to date. And there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes for the grand reveal when we dig out the snow and make that restroom available for people. Because really what we want to do is get people into the park and experiencing it. And that's the easy part, is going in and experiencing it. The hard part is making that seem easy.
Tracy, I've heard you and Chip often say that it's like a city. Mount Rainier National Park is like a city. Can you define what that means? You mentioned a few things just now, but what does that mean when you all say that?
Sure. I had a neighbor one time say to me, so do you guys work in the winter time at all? Or are you just kind of laid off in the winter? And it kind of made me laugh. The work doesn't stop. We do have people who live in the park. So, you know, obviously we have water and wastewater and things like that. But I'll share a little bit, you know, I think people are interested sometimes in the behind the scenes of the parks. There are a lot of different occupation types in national parks, kind of going across whether you're at Grand Canyon or Mount Rainier or similar. And we have jobs in all these fields. So if people are thinking that they're interested in park careers, or we've got students online right now who are watching this, you know, there are a lot of different opportunities within the National Park Service. So we have an administrative division that has IT and budget and commercial services, finance, administrative services, and then we have visitor and resource protection. That's what a lot of people think of with the rangers who are out patrolling the roads, but we also have dispatch operation. We have wilderness and backcountry rangers. We have mountaineering rangers who are kind of up on the mountain at Camp Muir, Camp Sherman, and ensuring that people have a safe upper mountain life. And we have aviation rangers, and we have fee collection folks who really, a lot of times, are the first person that you interact with when you come through the gate, giving you information. And those couple questions might be really essential to you having a good visit. Then we have natural and cultural resources folks, biologists, ecologists, aquatics folks, geologists, archaeologists, and we have people who specialize in our collections, because we have an incredible and really important collection of things associated with Mount Rainier's history that we have to curate and make available for folks who are doing research. And then our interpretation and education program, we have social media folks, people who are doing exhibits, people who are going out into schools and doing education programs or delivering them virtually like we're doing right now, like you folks helped with last week. And we also have folks who do the typical things you think of with rangers, with guided walks and snowshoe walks and hikes and campfire programs and swearing in junior rangers. And then we have our facilities program, which is at Mount Rainier, because we have so much built infrastructure, is one of the biggest programs that we have, which is roads, trails, utilities, carpenters. We have our, you know, electrical folks, custodial folks, and then we have folks who do project management, because there's a lot of projects going on to keep the infrastructure in place and running to ensure that people have a good visit. While 97% of the park is wilderness, which is kind of what you see in the picture behind me, just about the other 3% is included in a National Historic Landmark District, which Mount Rainier represents one of the earliest national park rustic style architectures. And you can see it when you drive through the park at Longmire and Paradise and Sunrise. So a lot of people behind the scenes making sure that they're at the top of their game in carpentry and masonry and other things. So it's a great team. We have about 110 permanent employees that make that work. And then we're added to by about 200 seasonals or so, which is often the folks that you see when you come out in the summer, because there are just more of them. They outnumber us.
We're gonna take a little poll, a couple of little polls here now, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the number of visitors that come into the parks and each year. So when you think about the number of people who come to Mount Rainier National Park, everyone, what would your guess be? And this isn't a typical year. Visitors to Mount Rainier. 30–40%. Keep going, folks. You're doing great here. Tracy, comments?
I can't see what's the voting at right now.
Yep. They're, it's 1 million to 1.5 million, 48% of the people are guessing that.
You know, they're just proving what I feel like I already know about the people who are interested in Mount Rainier. They're a smart bunch of people. Yes, that's basically what our visitation is. We had just over 1.5 million visitors in our most recent tabulation, and that's pretty consistent for a typical year. And as I mentioned, the largest section of those folks comes between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Each park has its own peak season, but for us, that's really the peak season at Mount Rainier. We have peaks though, you know, in the middle of the winter, the Paradise parking lot can look like a summer situation, but with 8 feet of snow around, really concentrated into a short period of time, which is great because we get to service a lot of people when the park is at its most beautiful. Also can be a bit of a challenge because we can have backups for folks who are wanting to get into the entrance. And so we're looking at different ways that we might be able to help resolve some of our challenges associated with visitor experience, both inside the park and just outside the park.
Thanks, Tracy. Another poll we want to throw out to everyone who's with us today. Climbing is such a popular activity and big sport for Mount Rainier. Of the approximately 10,000 people who attempt, there's a great photo, who attempt to summit Rainier each year, what percentage actually succeed? We have folks voting. You just a sec. You have another smart audience, Tracy.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So 46% it's getting 50% is getting the highest vote, and that's coming from 45% of the people. How accurate are they?
They're very accurate. That's exactly right. About half of the people who attempt to summit Mount Rainier are successful in doing that. People can do it independently, but they can also do it with commercial guide services. And it's very, very common for people to attempt multiple times before they're able to do it successfully. The picture I threw up behind me here, I wanted you to take a look at. So in addition to having specialized rangers who focus on helping those who might be in need up in the upper mountain, which is above 10,000 feet above Camp Muir and Camp Sherman, we also have a set of rangers who are associated with our aviation program. And the picture I put up is a park's exclusive use helicopter we contract out. And there's a ranger kind of just like down at the bottom of the picture there that you might be able to see. This is a really important tool that we utilize in Mount Rainier to try to ensure that we have safe visits. The people who are trained in our park support aviation and rotate through roles on the helicopter and provide rescue services for not only people on the upper mountain, but people elsewhere. You know, I've seen people comment thinking, oh, well, the helicopter must just be for those people who are summiting the mountain. But I wanted to make the point that actually quite often it's used for other things, search and rescue in the lowland part of the park, or assistance with bringing our staff into some place that's really difficult to get to. We also support our outside community sometimes when assistance is needed in assistance with search and rescue or fire. So it's a really talented group of people, again, back to the people here at Rainier. And the folks who have to do this work really are at the apex of their training and skills. And they provide a service. And this helicopter that we utilize at Mount Rainier is shared. We also support from time to time Olympic and North Cascades and the work that they do. And we're really thankful to Washington's National Park Fund because Washington's National Park Fund has assisted us with providing really important funding for gear for those folks, as well as for some of the special needs of not only the aviation and climbing folks, but also our search and rescue needs across the park. So thanks to WNPF for that.
Well, thank you. And I pass that on to a lot of the folks who are with us today because they are what makes all of that happen. So thank you, Tracy. Excuse me just a sec. Okay, we want to talk uniform. We're doing well on time here, so we want to talk uniform. Can you tell us a little bit about your whatever you want to share?
Uniform. My uniform keeps disappearing into the mountain when I go back and the hat gets eaten. I was saying to Laurie before we started, the hat has its own zip code. It's a big hat. As you can see, there's a picture that you have, I think, of some historic uniforms. Maybe you can pull it up and we'll talk a little bit about it. So I want to give credit where this is. This was High Desert Nature Museums had put together this picture. Thank you to WNPF for pulling it up. And you can kind of see the range of some of the women's uniforms over time. We variously look like we are in the military or perhaps we are flight attendants. I'm happy the uniforms have come a long way. We're in that third box of uniforms. While I don't get to wear shorts on the job, I can tell you that my colleagues in the Southeastern parks definitely are appreciative of the fact that they can do that. In the National Park Service, the uniform is really an iconic part of who we are. It hasn't changed all that much over time. And I'm glad for that. I haven't had to make a decision about clothing in about 20 years. But I will say that it is iconic. People all the world over know the Ranger hat. And there are actually two. The one I'm wearing is the winter hat. It's felt, looks a bit like a state trooper hat. And I have the long sleeves on. But then we also have the summer uniform where the hat is a straw hat. Not really great for getting wet. So we have these really not very beautiful hat covers that we put on them during the wetter times. But they do keep the sun out of your face. And really importantly, and this is something I want to say about the uniforms, we're all public servants. And you know, the uniforms really give us an opportunity to have a communication with the public. It tells the public that I work for you. I'm in this job and I take it seriously no matter what I do. And you see different versions. We have field uniforms where there's a ball cap and the name isn't on a metal badge like this, but it's sewn in. And each permutation of the uniform is really important because it identifies us as part of a consistent support network that you have when you're out there visiting the parks. It's true, we open the gate, make it available to you, and you choose your own adventure, and we're the facilitators of that adventure, and what we like to think of as the stewards. We're just of a really long line of service in the National Park Service that dates back to the late 1800s and continues on today, and will continue on in the future. And for us, the uniform is a part of that. It opens the conversation with you and the public, and it lets the public know that we're here for you. And you may not know what we're doing, digging in the dirt or retrieving things from the field or flying in a helicopter, but we work for you. And we're here to protect the resources and to ensure that your visit is as safe and as enjoyable as it can be.
And I want to tangent here just for a second. I have the privilege of...
Your volume went down. I can't hear you.
Thank you. I have the privilege of Sharon Cowell. Is it good? Volume okay?
Yeah.
Great. I have the privilege of working with a lot of the rangers and superintendents, and I want to share with the people that you all appreciate and admire them so much, and it is so real who they are and the service that they provide, and they love their jobs, and you see it. We all see it, and you know, they're remarkable people, and it's just a real privilege to work alongside of them. And so Thank you for that opportunity.
22,000 employees of the National Park Service all around the country. And, you know, I often say that it's good for us to take the time to acknowledge the fact that we're not the only park. We appreciate WMPF supporting Olympic and North Cascades as well. And we encourage people who may be watching this from someplace away from Washington State, you know, to get to know their local parks, because each one has its own special story to tell and its own unique reason for being. Every single park in the National Park Service basically has its own purpose or enabling legislation or something that caused the park to be created. And it's a fascinating story, especially now when we're looking at homeschooling a lot of our students and thinking about ways to engage them with the things that are nearby. I think National Park Service has always been and will continue to be a sort of natural laboratory and a place for citizen science and a place for people to learn about their communities, whether it's the geography of the place or the history of the place, or something about why that park is created and what you can do in your local community to continue to keep that park healthy. So, you know, it's a great time to be in the National Park Service, even though we're not able to have people in the parks right now.
Can you, one thing as we begin to wrap up a little bit, I often hear you say that national parks are in the forever business. And I love that. And people will ask me from time to time, do you think they'll ever go away? And I no doubt in my mind they'll be here forever. And can you share what those two words, that the national parks are in the forever business, what does that mean to you, Tracy?
Yeah, it means a lot. You know, I talked a little bit about public service, and I talked about, you know, this idea that we serve something kind of greater than ourselves. The National Park Service is often referred to, and I didn't make this up, and it does hold all these stories. And I talked a little bit about how those of us who are wearing the green and gray right now, we're just this little tiny piece of a longer story. And so, you know, many of the things that we're investing in now, whether it's with our time or the money of the taxpayers, they are incremental steps towards the preservation outcomes that we might see a long time from now. You know, whether it's doing inventory and monitoring or gathering information about really important species so that we can protect them when we're doing projects. We're always thinking about not just the now of providing for the people who we serve presently, but the now that will be in the future, and how people will experience their parks in the future, and how the parks will serve in all their ecosystem values and in all the things that national parks and protected areas do for our country, which is a lot more than just the experience someone has visiting it. The investments that we make are just a piece in that, and you can't really separate it from the whole, because it continues and it will continue. So sometimes we're working on things that we can see the immediate result right away, and that feels good. You know, you can see the smile on the visitor's face, the kid that gets to take the Junior Ranger pledge, or the person that gives our trail workers feedback or our maintenance workers feedback for the work that they're doing. They get that immediacy. But there's a longer term investment that we kind of owe the thanks to the people who came before us for doing a really job cutting that trail in the way they did, doing a really good job of building that building the way that they did. And we also have hope at the same time for those that will come after us. And not just the people in the green and gray, but the people in the public who, without whom we really wouldn't have a successful National Park Service. It's the actions of many that allow the national America's greatest idea, and as this thing that has value now and forever. And it only has as much value as it has caring that comes from the people who are out there on this webinar, or also people who are around the country and think about parks, visit the parks, care about the parks. And so we're kind of all deeply embedded together in this woven rope of a continuity of service from the beginning, the idea of having a National Park Service, all the way to the implementation, which might be that you have a visit with your child, and then that child has a visit with their children and their grandchildren. And so it continues in a long line of rangers pointing at things. And I'll put up a picture of me pointing at things when I was little.
Oh, Tracy.
So when I was, you know, some of you watched the other talk that I gave, you know, at the dinner. I'll talk just a little bit about, you know, one of the things that we really want to do in the National Park Service is invest in the next generation. Well, that was the past generation. That was me when I was a little ranger pointing at things over my head here. you know, there are a lot of kids out there enjoying nature, and many of them could be future park rangers. And for me, when I was really young, I had the chance to go to Congaree National Park in South Carolina. I had an experience with a ranger who was larger than life. And while I didn't make decisions about what I was going to study in college right then, I eventually did make decisions about what I was going to study in college and grad school and where I would go to work. And a lot of that came from a fire that was ignited by a one-on-one interaction with a park ranger in a park on the other side of the country. And I just encourage folks to connect with their park staff and connect with their staffs, because it's not too much of a step from that right there.
Tracy, cut out there just for a second.
Oh, I said it's not much of a step to get from that little girl to this slightly older girl.
And you know, it's funny how a lot of you often joke about that's a common pause or common stance right there.
The rangers pointing at things, yeah.
It's kind of fun. Everyone, I encourage you to go to our website and grab onto watch the video of Tracy at the spring dinner and auction a few years ago. It was really amazing. And you'll understand, if you haven't seen it, you'll understand when you watch that. There's the website. Also, last year, another ranger from Mount Rainier presented. Her name is Annie Kilby, and watch hers as well. All of these are posted on our website. If you have any hard time finding them, reach out to us and just ask anybody, and we can get you all set up and hooked up there. I have one more question for you, Tracy.
Yes.
Do you ever worry about volcanoes?
I don't worry too much about volcanoes. I've heard we have one in the park. You know, the way I think about risk in the National Park Service is, it's true. You know, Mount Rainier is, they call it one of the most dangerous volcanoes, and part of that's because of the population density in the Pacific Northwest. Every time there's a swarm of earthquakes, we start to get increased calls from people who are like, is this the time? Is this the big thing? You know, the thing I think more about is what happens from the small events. Things like glacial outburst floods, which we have a lot of at Mount Rainier, and they can threaten some of our infrastructure. You get up close and personal with the power of nature, right? And one of the big parts of the powers of nature is the power of water and how it moves off of this mountain. You know, whether we're trying to move it off of a road or move it off of a trail, or it's coming down really fast for some reason. But we've had a number of glacial outburst floods in the park that have impacted our road access or flood events. We had a flood event in 2006. This was a result of rain on snow that caused a heck of a lot of damage at the park. And it took out our main entrance road for 6 months. So the park was closed from, I want to say, November 6th of 2006, up all the way until Memorial Day of 2007. And that is something that I see much more likely to happen on a regular basis, and that visitors will find impacts their visits. I'd say almost all the infrastructure at Mount Rainier is built near a body of water, right? The roads are next to the Nisqually River, or next to Tahoma Creek, or next to any body of water in the park. And those bodies of water don't always follow the rules. They sometimes jump out of their chain, and sometimes they end up places where we didn't expect them to be. And as the glaciers retreat, you know, we're basically taking some of this material that's been locked up in the glaciers, and we're releasing it down. And so we're seeing increased sedimentation in many of the riverways. So riverbeds that used to be down below the road, where the road looked down into them, the riverbed's now higher than the road. And in some places that's causing flooding. And in some cases it's causing infrastructure damage. And back in that 2006 flood, we lost an entire campground called Sunshine Point Campground that was near the Nisqually entrance to the park. Continuing in the park, and that much of our built infrastructure is adjacent to bodies of water. So what Mount Rainier is doing is we have a group of scientists in the park who are supporting, they're geologists, and they're working to support the facilities folks in helping to plan for making our infrastructure more resilient to things like climate change. So for example, when the glaciers go back and we have more flooding on some of these roads, how can we make decisions now that'll make those roads more resilient, whether it's using engineered log jams along a road, or whether it's improving the size of culverts, making them bigger. You know, our goal is to try to ensure as long and as strong of an access that we can have for the public to the park, while we also try to change and have our management adapt to the conditions that we're facing. So volcanoes themselves, I'm less worried about than all the other small things that are possibly going to contribute to someone's visit at the park.
Thanks, Tracy. We're going to begin to wrap up now, and I want to point out that last week we had a reading of If I Were a Ranger by an author who was actually in the crowd that day listening in. We had 1,000 people sign up. It was absolutely adorable. If you get a chance, tune in, and that's on our website. 2 weeks ago, we featured the Fishers and the progress they're making over at Olympic National Park. That was great too. Now, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have webinars always Wednesdays at 12 noon, excuse me, for 45 minutes. Next couple of weeks, we're going to be featuring the transporting of the goats from Olympic over to North Cascades. We're going to look at glacier studies, do another children's program, probably bring in another person like Tracy or 2 or 3. So stay with us and keep tuning in. Sign up for our newsletter at our website. Tracy, any closing comments you want to make? And just huge thanks to you. You're a joy to work with.
Thank you. You know, I'd say to people that, you know, the national parks are here for you. And I realize that right now things are challenging out in our communities while we're practicing social distancing and parents are teaching their kids from home. And we're trying to minimize the amount of people who are going to congregate in any one place for everyone's health and safety. The National Park Service, even in this time, plays a role in supporting the goals of public health. You know, our staff are taking all the precautions that they can, and we're managing park access to ensure that once we're able to welcome you again, it'll be a safe visit for you and your family, and it'll also protect the park employees and the people in our local communities. So use this time to go out and explore the parks virtually. There are a lot of really, really great websites where you can go and explore national parks. Google it, I know you'll find it. There are many education rangers out there developing tools for teachers that can be used in curriculum. We have some incredibly talented folks who are adapting some of the work that we do to meet state curriculum standards, and I'd say that that's a great resource for you. You can spend this time doing planning for your next visit for what you're going to try to do in the park. And also, and I think this is really important, contemplate the value of our public lands and what it means to you in all ways, whether it's just knowing that it's there or whether it's having a chance to go out and hit the trail. So we're looking forward to seeing you again as soon as we can. And we thank you for giving us the chance to talk a little bit about Mount Rainier today.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next Wednesday on our next virtual field trip. Take care.